Well, welcome to session number 2 of our 6 Reasons to Hope series. If you were with us last time, you know that we said that it turns out that hope can actually be measured, that hope can actually be built in your life, that there are attitudes and behaviors and processes that you can do to actually increase the level of hope in your life. And just knowing that is true, at least for me, already gives me a little bit of hope. And today we're calling this session The Hope That House Built. And no, that's not a typo. I think by the end of this session, you'll get what that means, or you'll conclude what you kind of already knew, which is that your pastor is a very, very strange fellow. But today it's going to be practical. And by the end of today's session, you and I are going to be doing an exercise to practically build hope into our lives. But before we get there, I want us to take a step back and look at the big picture, because I actually think there are 2 kinds of real hope. I think there's what I'm calling a big H hope and a small h hope. So big H hope is that cosmic long-term hope that comes from knowing, yielding to, and trusting in a holy God. Last week we sang, "My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness." So in coming weeks, we're going to look at that big H hope, the hope that comes from a personal encounter with Jesus Christ. But today I want to look at the small h hope. So that's the practical, everyday attitudes, decisions, and behaviors that lead to a sense of hope and well-being in the short term. And so you may be going, oh man, is this some, self-help psychology? Well, the capacity to work towards a better future is a gift from God. And if you look at the book of Proverbs, it's all about how to build a better future by living God's way. It's all about practical wisdom for living in the world the way it actually works. So today we're going to begin with that everyday small h hope. And I think this makes sense because one can lead to the other. Because I might tell somebody that Jesus is the answer, and that's true, but if they're starving to death, they're so organized and focused on meeting that basic need, they're not really interested in hearing about the big picture. Or if I've just stepped in a bee's nest and I'm getting stung, that's not the time to talk to me about the benefits of long-term life insurance, right? So it matters where you are. And I think that if we begin to get a little of that little h hope in our lives, that can impact our interest in the bigger picture of our spirituality. So today we're going to begin with just a few scriptures, a few of the scriptures we could look at, there's tons of them, that begin to shape for us what that small h hope is like. And so we will begin with the book of Proverbs. So the old King James Version interprets Proverbs 29:18 this way: "Where there is no vision, the people perish." Now that's a loose translation of the Hebrew, but the truth of the statement remains. And I think you could put it this way: where there is no hope, the people perish. Study after study has shown that when people give up hope, they perish more quickly. Well, what is vision? Vision is the ability to see a future. So where there is no ability to see a different future, there is no hope. And where there is no hope, the people perish. Now, it's not a guarantee that if you have a vision that you're going to be successful and full of hope. But if you don't have at least a vision of what the future could be, you don't even have a chance. Well, what is a basic vision for how I ought to live to experience hope? Proverbs chapter 4 continues in verse 25. "Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Make level paths for your feet and take only ways that are firm. Do not swerve to the right or the left. Keep your foot from evil." So The paths you choose really matter. And notice it mentions multiple paths. In each area of our life, we have goals or a preferred future. So I have a preferred future for where I want to be morally, where I want to be spiritually, where I want to be financially, what I want my family situation to be like, what I want my house or my home to be like. These are all different areas of my life, and so there's multiple paths, one to each of these goals. And so it's actually a good thing to have multiple goals. So for each of these goals, there's a wise path and a good path. And if I want to get to where I want to get to, I've got to stay on that path and not drift, not go astray. But that's hard, isn't it? Because some of these things, there might be some easy thing that I get done in a day, but some goals take years. And that's really hard because that takes discipline. And the Bible knows that discipline is not easy for us. In Hebrews 12:13, it says this: "No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who've been trained by it." So I do difficult and hard work today so that I can reap a harvest of peace and righteousness in the future. It goes on, "Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees. Make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed." Do you hear again this need for paths and the willingness to walk in them? Because when you do, some of the wounded parts in you begin to heal. Not all of them, but some of them. Hebrews goes on, "Make every effort to live in peace with all men and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one misses the grace of God and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many." So note the scriptures say, make every effort. Effort is required to live at peace with the people you disagree with. And effort is required for every path that is worth taking. Verse 15 almost defines unhappiness and what people do when they have no hope. When the grace of God is missing from your life, when a root of bitterness grows in our hearts. And this bitterness is often a reaction to a deep sense of hopelessness. And then instead of being a blessing to others, we bring trouble and heartache on others. So where is hope found? Sometimes in the most unpromising places. Ecclesiastes 9:10 says this: "Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might." Well, that sounds pretty encouraging. "For in the grave where you are going, there is neither working, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom." Well, that's pretty chipper, isn't it? Like, hey, you're going to die. But I think it's that kind of, seize the day, live while you can, because you only get one shot at this. But there's something else buried here. Look at that last part of the scripture. "In death, there is neither working, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom." Well, what's the implication? The implication is that life should be about those four things. So let's rearrange them in the order that they actually occur in when we're looking at the future and trying to achieve something. First, you need accurate knowledge about what is real in the world. Then you need the wisdom to know what is really important and good and true and worth pursuing. Then you need to make a plan to achieve that goal. And then you need to actually do it. You got to work the plan. In my own life, when I feel like I'm gaining in any one of those four areas, if I'm I'm getting more knowledge, or I'm getting more wisdom, or I'm actually planning for the future, or I'm actually doing the work. All four of those can actually give me some sense of hope. Because this, I think, is what we were designed for. Not to just be static, but to be moving towards a preferred future. I actually think this is the way God intentionally created us and ordered us. That we are to be creatures that are about gaining knowledge and gaining wisdom and making plans for the future and then working the plan. And that's what Scripture teaches. And you might say, okay, big deal. This isn't rocket science. It seems pretty obvious. Yeah, but look at how amazingly this lines up with some of the latest psychological research. We're going to be looking again at this book, Hope Rising, How the Science of Hope Can Change Your Life. Let me start by trying to summarize what they say real hope is not. Real hope is not simply wishful thinking. You know, lots of people live in a dream world that is actually a denial of reality. And either they just go on living in a fantasy their whole life, or they realize their dreams are never going to come true, and then they end up cynical, bitter, or in despair. Real hope also isn't simply optimism. There are lots of people who are optimists, but it's just a way of looking at the world, and then they never follow through. Real hope, as we're about to see, is much more powerful than optimism. It's extremely realistic. It doesn't think things are always going to be great and shiny, yet it perseveres and actually produces beautiful lives in the midst of heartache. And real hope is not simply self-efficacy, by which I mean it's not just someone who's really confident about their ability to achieve and has the capacity to achieve and get things done. So real hope isn't about just being really confident. I know lots of confident people who aren't competent at all. And it's not just about being busy all the time and getting her done, because you might be just wasting your life on activities that don't really matter. But, however, when you have a realistic goal and can see a realistic path to achieve it and have the will to pursue it, these three together begin to grow hope in your heart. Real practical hope happens when you can see you are making some kind of progress, any kind of progress towards a desired goal, a desired future. Here's a direct quote from this book by Gwynne and Hellman. They say this: hope is the idea that you have goals you desire to achieve, you can identify pathways towards the goals, and you can direct and sustain your willpower toward the goal and pathways necessary to reach those goals. This simple yet powerful trilogy of goals, pathways, and willpower, now confirmed in hundreds of published studies, has become the science of hope. All right, so first let's talk about those goals. Notice it's goals plural. And I mentioned before that in our lives, there's all these different areas of our life. You know, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a pastor, I'm a person in the community, and I have different areas of my life that I have different goals in. And some of them are small and maybe silly, like, hey, I want to grow great grapes this year. Maybe some of them are long and important, like I want to be responsible with my money so I have enough to retire. It's key, I think, to have multiple goals, because we can get fixated on one thing and we think, if only that, then I'd be happy. If only that. And that's really not the way life works. And sometimes that never comes. And so you want to have multiple irons in the fire, actually. You want to have your attention on multiple goals at the same time, because not all of them are going to come to fruition. but some of them will. And so you want at least a few of those goals being reached to build hope into your life. Okay, and then it talks about pathways. So pathways are the steps where, okay, this is what I want to get to. What are the steps I need to take to get there? Well, what if you're like, well, I know where I want to go, but I have no idea how to get there. I don't know anything about it. I don't even know where to start. Well, that's where other people come in, and the beauty of community and God's idea that we would be kind of a village together. Because the next question then is, okay, well, who do you know who either has expertise or experience in that area? Who could you brainstorm this with? Maybe you don't know the paths, but maybe you know somebody who could help you figure out those paths. Okay, so say you have a goal and you can see the steps you could try to reach it, but you just don't have the energy. You're feeling beaten down, depressed. You just don't think you'll have the willpower to stick to it. Maybe you're the kind of person who's good at starting things, but not so good at finishing things. Well, in that case, then again, what you need is the village. Who is somebody who could be your cheerleader? Who is someone who could encourage you? Who is someone who could hold you accountable? Like, almost like a life coach or a friend, like, hey, I want you to hold me accountable to this. This is where we need each other to be cheerleaders in our lives to help us on those days when we just don't feel like it. So notice that this definition of hope is not a feeling, it's a verb. It's a process. It's a way of being in life. And what if that's the way God actually designed us? Like, I think sometimes what we think is, well, if I feel happy, then I'll be hopeful. And so we focus on just kind of being and trying to satiate ourselves with pleasures, hoping that will make us feel happy, and then that'll make us feel hopeful. But it never works that way. What if God really designed us to be these beings who need to be looking at the future, identifying goals, and moving towards them? As I've thought about myself and the times that I really get down in the dumps, it's often when I feel hopeless, and a lot of that is I'm no longer trying to move forward. I'm no longer trying to achieve goals. I've stopped that process. I'm kind of just being there, static. So is this book one of those like pie in the sky things, like you can do anything, you can achieve anything, just follow our 3 simple steps? No, it's pretty down to earth. And as a matter of fact, most of their work is with people who've gone through incredible trauma. Here are 4 realistic limits to this model of hope. First, because we're broken people in a broken world, we cannot have it all. I'm going to have different goals for my family and work and personal growth and discipleship. And if I try and do everything, they're going to collide and compete for my time. So I can't do it all. I have to prioritize. I have to choose, because oftentimes it just doesn't all fit. And I've got to be willing to lay down some of my goals. Second, because we are broken people in a broken world, we may have to lower our sights to a more realistic goal if the original goal is not attainable. I need to try multiple paths, but then I need to adjust. So don't give up on a goal until you feel like you really have tried or at least thought through a number of available pathways. But if it turns out that the goal is not realistic, Okay, well, there's still something positive you can do that will make the future a little bit brighter than if you do nothing at all. You can work towards something. Number 3, because we're broken people in a broken world, we're not going to feel happy or hopeful all the time. But hope as a verb, as a way of life, produces the best long-term outcomes. In fact, you may not feel happy at all. You may feel angry. But you know what? Anger, the right kind of anger, can actually be fuel to build hope and to motivate and push you in the direction you need to go. Listen to what St. Augustine said. He said, "Hope has two beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to see that they do not remain as they are." You can work towards something, and actually you need to, because broken people, number 4, need to be about setting and pursuing goals, no matter how small, in order to have hope. So, let me tell you about a brutal example of having to let go of your idealized goal in order to turn into a more realistic goal, a change that allowed real hope to rise in a terrible situation. In 597 BC, the new superpower in the Middle East, the Babylonian Empire, invaded Judah, destroyed Jerusalem, and dragged its people off to live as prisoners of war, aliens in the city of Babylon. Talk about political unrest. Think what this was like for the Jews. They had lost everything they loved. Nothing was familiar or comforting. They were dumped with nothing in a foreign land in the midst of a people who looked different and spoke different and had totally different customs. Oh, and were the people responsible for ruining their lives. Talk about racial tension. They felt powerless, utterly out of control of their futures. What was their idealized goal? That things would go back to the way they were before. That they could get their old lives back. Sound familiar? But there was no valid, realistic pathway to achieve that goal. If they had attempted rebellion, they would have been slaughtered. It wasn't the right time. Then what does God do? He commands them to aim at a more achievable goal. A goal they could obtain. Listen to Jeremiah 29, 4-7. "This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper." You see, this was possible. These were real things, good things that they could do despite their trials and their suffering. Think about it. Build houses. That requires a vision of what the house will look like, and then planning, and then many steps, and then the will to make it happen, then the actual doing. Settle down. What does that mean? Live life here and now. Do things that will make life a little better tomorrow. Create courtyards and vineyards and culture and habits and routines that are life-affirming. And so you see, today's message was called "The Hope That House Built," because we've often heard a number of stories that go the other way, like this: the house that hope built, something like Ronald McDonald House. And you know, people have enough drive and goodwill and hope to build such a house. But you see, it also works the other way around too. Hope can lead to building, but building can lead to hope. You see, it is in the doing what can be done, even when you really don't feel like it. It is in taking those positive steps toward a slightly better future. It is in building of the house that hope shows up unexpected. Hope sneaks in the back door. So, this is how we want to end, by actually doing that. So, you and I are going to do an exercise together to end our time. And so don't just sit there and be passive, right? Like this whole thing we've been talking about is be dynamic, do the thing. So here's what you need to do. You need to get a piece of paper and something to write with. And I'm not going to be insulted if you need to pause me right now to get those. So I'll wait. Okay, so I'm hoping you have your paper and your writing implement. This is going to take 5 minutes or less. And what you're going to do, and I'm going to do it too, is work through 4 steps based on everything we looked at today. And you're going to come out with something you can do, hopefully begin today or this week, and to actually do it. And then to see if you notice anything. All right, so you ready? Here we go. So I hope this little exercise gave you a little sliver of hope. Let's actually do it this week. And the key is, even when I don't feel like it, the feelings come at the other side of it. Let's just accomplish a few small things that are bugging you or, really depressing you or making you angry. Let's see if there's a few small steps we can take this week. And so I want to pray over you that God would use this week in a beautiful way in your life. So the Lord keep you. The Lord bless you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and give you hope. Lord willing, I'll see you next week. Amen.